side impact door beams. Before this car, nobody was putting steel reinforcement inside doors specifically to protect passengers from T-bone collisions. Saab did it first. First headlight wipers. Yes, really. Little wipers for your headlights. This was Sweden. It snows there a lot. Your headlights get covered in slush and road grime, and suddenly you can't see. Saab's solution was elegantly obvious. The doors extended past the sill. This seems like a tiny detail until you understand why. When you get out of a car in winter, your pants brush against the door sill. That sill is covered in road salt and snow and dirt. You walk around with a gray stripe on your leg all day. Saab's doors overlap the sill so your pants stayed clean. The world's first seat heaters. Again, Sweden. Cold. Leather seats in winter feel like sitting on an ice rink. Saab fixed it. Activated carbon cabin filtration in the 1960s, when most cars still had vent windows and called it climate control. The windscreen was curved in a very specific way. It left more room for the driver's head in a crash, while simultaneously providing excellent visibility and improved aerodynamics. One design element, three benefits. And that distinctive shape at the rear of the car? Why, that concave section that looked like nothing else on the road, that wasn't styling. That wasn't a designer trying to be different. Saab spent time in a wind tunnel in the 1960s studying airflow break over the trailing edge of the roof. They were trying to control wake turbulence. The shape you see on a Saab, that's the result of wind tunnel testing, not design sketches. The 99 also had a flat underbody for aerodynamic efficiency. Saab claimed it was tied with the Citroën DS for the lowest drag coefficient of any car in production. The DS, one of the most aerodynamically advanced cars ever built. And Saab said, yeah, we matched that. These were airplane engineers. They didn't know you weren't supposed to wind tunnel test a family car in 1967. They just did it because it made sense. Now, let's talk about who actually bought these things. In 1972, there was a study of university faculty that tracked an uncanny correlation between the car they drove and their political leanings. That year's presidential election was the second largest landslide in American history. Richard Nixon defeated George McGovern. Only 37.5% of the public voted for McGovern. However, 98% of Saab driving academics voted for him. 98%. The only group more liberal than Saab drivers were people who had no car at all. There's something almost poetic about that. A car built by Scandinavian engineers, designed with safety and efficiency and thoughtful details, attracting buyers who thought differently about the world. The car was a statement, even when you weren't trying to make one. But here's where Saab really predicted the future, and this is the part that car enthusiasts have been arguing about for decades. In 1978, Saab added a turbocharger to the 99. Now, turbocharged cars existed before this. The Porsche 930 Turbo had come out a couple of years earlier, but that was a different animal entirely. The Porsche was a purpose-built sports car, wide fenders, whale-tail spoiler, designed to go fast and look like it was going fast. The Saab, this was a family car, and that distinction matters more than you might think. Porsche's goal with turbocharging was outright performance, ultimate horsepower numbers, lap times, the kind of power that made the car genuinely difficult to drive. Saab's goal was something else entirely. They wanted to maintain the efficiency of a relatively small four-cylinder while adding the smooth, effortless torque of a much bigger engine. Think about that philosophy for a moment. Don't make the engine bigger. Don't add more cylinders. Keep the small, efficient engine and just make it work harder when you need it to. This is exactly how modern cars work. Every turbocharged four-cylinder on the road today follows this philosophy. Your average crossover SUV runs a 2-liter turbo because it gives you 6-cylinder power with 4-cylinder fuel economy. Saab figured this out in 1978.
Wrecked his truck up at Ford
The 99 Turbo established the recipe for today's quietly powerful four-cylinder cars. Not turbocharged for racing, turbocharged for real-world driving. Very much unlike the turbocharged sports cars of the era. The 99 Turbo only lasted a year in production before the 900 came out. And the 900 is where this whole philosophy came together into something remarkable. From the driver's seat rearward, the 900 was identical to the 99. Same glass, same doors, same body panels, same hatch. They didn't change anything that was already working. Changes up front addressed new U.S. crash regulations. The wheelbase stretched by 2 inches. The front extended by 8 inches. That critical rollover load path now formed a Z shape instead of a straight line. But it was still there, still doing its job. Every feature from the 99 carried over. Quick thing. If you're enjoying this deep dive into unconventional automotive engineering, hit subscribe. We do stuff like this every week. Okay, back to the Swedish weirdness. Let's talk about this engine layout, because it's genuinely one of the strangest in automotive history. The 900 is a front-wheel drive car. Pretty normal. But the engine sits longitudinally. That's front to back, the way it would sit in a rear-wheel drive car. And it's located almost entirely in front of the front axle. Here's where it gets weird. The engine is turned around 180 degrees, backwards, and leaned over at a 45-degree angle. Why 45 degrees? Because the 99's original engine was half of a Triumph Stag V8. V8s use 90-degree cylinder banks. Cut a 90-degree V8 in half, and you get a 45-degree slant 4. The engine drives the transmission via a chain, not a direct connection. Yes, a chain. This arrangement created some interesting service situations. Doing a clutch replacement was actually easier than replacing the V-belts. On most cars, the clutch is buried deep in the drivetrain. On a Saab 900, you could get to it pretty readily. The exhaust, though, the exhaust routing is something engineers probably lost sleep over. The exhaust exits the side of the cylinder head and travels forward toward the headlight. It encounters the turbocharger, then makes a U-turn and passes within approximately a quarter inch of the battery's warning sticker about heat exposure, a quarter inch. Then it finally routes toward the rear of the car. If you've ever wondered why Saab owners developed reputations as particular about maintenance, this is why. The car rewarded attention and punished neglect. Now let's talk about what made the Saab turbo system genuinely innovative, because it wasn't just adding a turbocharger to an engine. That's the easy part. Saab developed something called APC, Automatic Performance Control. This was the first system to automatically reduce boost in response to knock. Engine knock happens when fuel ignites prematurely from heat and pressure instead of from the spark plug. It's bad. It damages engines. And turbocharged engines are particularly prone to it because the compressed air charge is hot. Most turbocharged engines of the era dealt with this by running extremely low compression ratios. The Porsche 911 Turbo ran a compression ratio of 6.5 to 1, very low. This gave the engine room to add boost without the air-fuel mixture getting hot enough to knock. The Saab 900 Turbo, toward the end of its production run, had a compression ratio of 9 to 1. That's a massive difference. High compression means better efficiency when you're off boost. You're not wasting energy compressing air more than necessary. But it also means more knock risk when the turbo starts pushing air in. The APC system monitored for knock and automatically reduced boost pressure when it detected any. This meant Saab could run high compression for efficiency during normal driving, then still add turbo boost for power without destroying the engine. The car could run on low-octane fuel if that's all you had. It would just make less power. Fill it with premium, and the system would let the turbo work harder. This was sophisticated engine management in an era when most cars still had carburetors. The wastegate design was also unusual. Most turbo systems regulate boost by monitoring intake charge pressure. More pressure means more boost, means you open the wastegate to bleed off exhaust and slow the turbo down. Saab's wastegate reacted to exhaust pressure instead. This changed the character of the power delivery. The Saab turbo's torque curve more closely resembled a larger, naturally aspirated motor than a turbocharged one. Peak boost was only about 8 to 10 pounds per square inch, not high by sports car standards. This meant it didn't produce huge horsepower numbers. When the APC first came out, the turbo engine made 135 horsepower compared to the naturally aspirated version's 110, 25 extra horsepower. Not exactly earth-shattering, but here's what the numbers don't tell you. And the turbo torque down low made the 900 turbo very quick around town at typical driving speeds. That modest top-end difference didn't matter much because you spent most of your time in the part of the rev range where the turbo actually don't. And importantly, the car wasn't sluggish off boost. High compression meant it didn't feel like it was waiting for the turbo to wake up. It just felt like a good engine that happened to have more to give when you asked for it. This is why modern turbocharged engines work the way they do. Small displacement for efficiency, high compression for throttle response, electronic boost management to prevent knock, tuned for real-world power, not peak horsepower numbers. The Saab 900 Turbo got there decades early. On the interior was another area where Saab's aircraft heritage showed through. Fighter jet designers worked on the dashboard layout. The result wrapped around the driver for easier access and peripheral visibility. Controls were clear, easy to read, and laid out with the most frequently used items closest to the driver's line of sight. You didn't have to hunt for switches while driving. The radio was positioned up high. This seems obvious now, but in the 1970s and early 80s, other manufacturers routinely placed radios down by the driver's feet. You'd have to take your eyes completely off the road to change a station. Saab put it where you could see it at a glance. The emergency brake worked on the front wheels. This sounds wrong because almost every other car uses a rear emergency brake. But with a 60-40 weight distribution, heavy in the front wheels better hold the car in place on a hill. They did change this to the rear wheels for 1988, probably because mechanics were tired of explaining it. The ignition was between the seats, down by the floor console. This wasn't Saab being quirky for the sake of it. To remove the key, you had to have the car in reverse gear. Then the shifter stayed locked in reverse. Multiple purposes here. Drivers didn't need to use the emergency brake in icy conditions where cables tend to freeze. The car wouldn't roll away if someone knocked it into neutral. And most importantly, it moved the key away from the area the driver's right knee would occupy in an accident. In a frontal impact, anything hard and protruding near your knee becomes a hazard. On the steering column, the ignition key, anything. Saab moved the key somewhere it couldn't hurt you. Airplane thinking again. Where will body parts be during an impact? Don't put hard objects there. Now you might be wondering how a car designed in 1967 could still be competitive in the late 80s. That's a 20-year-old platform competing with cars designed a decade later. The answer is that the fundamentals were so right that they aged exceptionally well. The driving experience was so good that the 99 came out in 1967, but the 900 was still holding its own against contemporary competition 2 decades later. Here's a remarkable fact. Saab reported sales increases every single month for 60 consecutive months from 1982 to 1987. Every month. For 5 years straight. Sales went up on a car that was 20 years old at that point. That doesn't happen with normal cars. Normal cars hit their peak and decline. The market moves on. Newer designs come out with more features, and the old model fades. The 900 didn't fade. It kept finding new buyers who appreciated what it offered. Automotive journalist David E. Davis wrote about the 900 Turbo in 1982. His description captures something about the car that specifications can't. He called it a Mercedes-Benz that wandered out of the house one night during an acid experience and was never the same again. It existed in an altered state, he said. A marvelous blend of solid citizen moon values with a proclivity for the occasional breach of the peace. His conclusion about the turbo: it was a safe, practical car that you and mom and the kids could use to escape from the cops. That captures the duality perfectly. Responsible engineering, unconventional execution, a car for people who wanted something thoughtful but refused to be boring. The Saab 900 Turbo wasn't a sports car pretending to be a family sedan. It wasn't a family sedan with a sporty trim package bolted on. It was something genuinely different. A car that took the entire automotive formula and rethought it from first principles. Should safety be a compromise? Saab said no and engineered load paths. Should efficiency require sacrificing power? Saab said no and pioneered practical turbocharging. Should good handling require a harsh ride? Saab said no and built a stiffer structure. Should the driver adapt to the car's layout? Saab said no and hired fighter jet designers to make the car adapt to the driver. Every assumption the automotive industry made, Saab questioned. Not all of their answers were right. Some of their engineering decisions created maintenance headaches. The backwards leading engine with the exhaust routed past the battery wasn't exactly mechanic friendly, but the fundamental philosophy was sound. Start with what the driver and passengers actually need. Work backward from there. Don't accept limitations just because everyone else has accepted them. This is why people compare Saab to Tesla. Not because of electric drivetrains, obviously. The 900 ran on gasoline, but because of the approach. Coming from outside the traditional automotive industry, questioning assumptions, but prioritizing different things than the established manufacturers. Tesla came from Silicon Valley and asked why cars couldn't work like computers. Saab came from aircraft manufacturing and asked why cars couldn't work like airplanes. Both found customers who appreciated the different perspective. The 900 ended production in 1993, replaced by a new platform. Saab continued for another 2 decades before finally closing in 2012, a victim of corporate ownership changes and the 2008 financial crisis. But the ideas pioneered in the 99 and 900, those live on. Every modern turbocharged 4-cylinder with good low-end torque owes something to Saab's philosophy. Every car with side impact door beams uses technology Saab introduced. Every vehicle designed with crumple zones and load paths reflects thinking that Saab's aircraft engineers brought to automotive design. The heated seats keeping you comfortable right now? Saab did that first. The cabin air filter cleaning the air you breathe? Saab did that first. The dashboard designed around the driver instead of designed around what's easy to manufacture? Saab pushed the industry in that direction. And here's the thing about the Saab 900. You can still buy one. They made hundreds of thousands of them. They're solidly built. Many are still running. Values have climbed as people rediscover what made these cars special, but they're not unobtainable. If you want to experience 1980s automotive innovation, if you want to understand what it felt like to drive something designed by people who genuinely thought differently about cars, a Saab 900 Turbo is still out there waiting. Just know what you're getting into. The backwards engine, the exhaust routing past the battery, the ignition between the seats. The need for owners who understand that unconventional engineering sometimes requires unconventional maintenance. But that's the trade-off. You can have a car that follows all the rules and works like every other car. Or you can have a car built by airplane engineers who thought the rules were wrong. The Saab 900 was built for people who chose the second option. 98% of them apparently also voted for McGovern, so that's the Saab 99 and 900. An aircraft manufacturer's answer to automotive design, a preview of turbocharging philosophy that wouldn't become standard for 30 years. A car built by people who assume that if you're going to engineer something, you might as well engineer it right. If you've driven one of these or you have opinions about unconventional automotive engineering, put it in the comments. And if you made it this far through a deep dive on Swedish cars with backwards engines, you're probably going to like what else we've got coming. Subscribe. We do this every week.
But Kim is a man torn between two worlds. The traditions of his brutal communist past and the need to become a legitimate modern leader.
That is his dilemma. Am I going to come out and become a cleaner, softer dictator, or am I going to continue to retain this criminal regime that I inherited from my grandfather and my father? And that dilemma, you know what? It could be the end of the Kim dynasty.
Kim Jong-un is only the third man to rule North Korea. He is following his grandfather and father in the role of supreme leader. They rule over their people as gods. Should he try to drag North Korea into the
That's where all the cancer-causing Wi-Fi comes
but
from.
risk losing his grip on power? Or should he continue to run a rogue state like his grandfather and father before him?
If I compare it to a movie, I would say it's Godfather 3. And that's when Michael Corleone wants to become a legitimate businessman and head of a business conglomerate out from the shadows of the mafia regime that he inherited. But without the mafia state, the Kim regime would not function. Why? Because it is under heavy sanctions, the only way that it can make hard currency is by illicit trade. The North Korean regime is in many respects a huge criminal cartel.
Guns, drugs, counterfeit cash, and cybercrime bring in an estimated $2 billion a year for Kim to spend.
That's his personal
Yeah, they got places
piggyback.
to be.
And that is the way the Kim Jong regime is sustained.
Recently, Kim has shown signs of modernizing. He's been stepping out with his first lady and meeting other world leaders. But in 2017, he was dragged back into his family business. This is his elder half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, who was overlooked for succession. He left North Korea for a quiet life in China, surfacing on camera from time to time to speak out against the regime.
Better shut
But then
up.
it seemed Kim Jong-nam crossed the line.
During the course of my reporting, I was told by a person with good connections to the intelligence community in the United States that Kim Jong-nam had in fact been an informant to the CIA and was supplying information about Kim Jong-un to them.
These CCTV images show him meeting the
Highway
suspected
of
handler.
Legends.
A fascinated news media shadowed his every move.
He still had very good connections to the regime. So for the CIA
We're
to be
gonna get
able
a
to
deer
recruit
on the highway.
Kim Jong-nam as an informant and to get whatever information he had, it would have been a huge deal for them. This would also have been considered very treasonous by Kim Jong-un.
It seems the time had come for Kim to deal with his older brother. February 13th, 2017. Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Kim Jong-un's brother enters the terminal unaware that two female assassins are also at the airport. Now, for the
You
first
can't
time
park
on
there.
television, one of the assassins tells her full, extraordinary story. It begins with her being recruited by a man who claimed to be a TV producer.
Pada waktu pertama saya kenal James tuh orangnya baik, terus kayak lucu juga kan, ikut syuting, katanya ikut syuting gimana aku bilang, syuting kayak buat lucu-lucuan gitu, lucu-lucuan gimana, kayak gimana ya, nggak kenal kayak boom prank. Jadi saya juga mikirnya oh ya udahlah gitu.
For months, Kim Jong-un's agents groomed City and another young woman to ambush unsuspecting members of the public and smother their faces with cosmetic creams and what they thought were hidden camera show stunts.
Saya kerap dan sering itu melakukan prank, dipakai embody dan pakai baby gitu, baby oil gitu. Jadi saya rasa ya seperti biasa aja gitu.
City's handler arranges a meeting at a cafe in the airport. There, she is to receive details of the target.
Terus pas hari hanya kan, kebetulan kan memang di KLI kan lumayan rame. Nanti kalau misalnya kalau kamu acting yang ini ya katanya bagus ini, nanti kemungkinan bos juga akan kasih kamu bonus lagi. Dia ke saya, dia bilang itu orangnya gitu. saya bilang yang mana gitu kan, itu yang pakai jaket warna abu-abu katanya gitu kan, yang mana itu, oh yang botak bilang kan.
Off onto a rocket-powered sled. One of the earliest instances of this law being stated explicitly happens in 1877 when Alfred Holt, in an address to the Institution of Civil Engineers, said, "It is found that anything that can go wrong at sea generally does go wrong sooner or later." By 1908 it had become a well-loved maxim among magicians as well, as explained by Neville Maskelyne in The Magic Circular. It reads, "It is an experience common to all men to find that on any special occasion, everything that can go wrong will go wrong." This was reiterated by Adam Holt Shirk in The Sphinx in 1928, where it reads, "It is an established fact that in 9 cases out of 10, whatever can go wrong in a magical performance will do so." So this all brings us to our unsung hero of the hour, Dr. John Paul Stapp, a man whose work has saved hundreds of thousands of lives since, and who Joseph Kittinger, who famously did a high-altitude jump from 102,800 feet, called the bravest man I've ever met. He knew the effects of what he was getting himself into, and he never hesitated. Born in Brazil, the son of American missionaries there, Stapp eventually became an English major in college, but he changed career paths due to a traumatic incident that occurred during his Christmas break of 1928 when a 2-year-old cousin of his was severely burned in a fireplace. Stapp helped to try and nurse the child back to health, but efforts failed, and 63 hours after getting burned, the toddler died. Said Stapp, "It was the first time I had ever seen anyone die. I decided right then I wanted to be a doctor." Unable to afford to go to medical school initially, after he earned a master's degree in zoology, he instead started teaching chemistry and zoology at Decatur College in Texas while he saved up money. 2 years later, he attended the University of Texas, where he got a PhD in biophysics. Next up, he went to the University of Minnesota Medical School and got a Doctor of Medicine degree while working as a research assistant there. Initially planning on becoming a pediatrician, Stapp changed career paths after joining the Army Medical Corps during World War II. While working as a flight surgeon, among other things, he was heavily involved in designing high-altitude oxygen systems as well as studying the effects of high-altitude and high-speed flight on the human body. The end goal of all of this was to create better safety systems for pilots. During this time, he became puzzled at how some people would survive crashes, even extreme ones, while others in similar or lesser crashes would receive fatal injuries. This all brings us around to Project NX-981, which took place at the Edwards Air Force Base in 1945. Up until this point, the prevailing theory was that a human body could not withstand more than 18 Gs of force without suffering a fatal injury. The problem here was that airplanes of the age were flying faster and higher than ever before. As such, the military wanted to know if their pilots could safely eject at these high velocities without being killed, as well as trying to design the safest systems possible for that ejection. Testing towards this end was overseen by Dr. Stapp using a rocket-powered sled called the G-Whiz. This was placed on rails on a 2,000-foot track, at the end of which was an approximately 50-foot-long section where a hydraulic braking system would stop the 1,500-pound sled in its tracks. The passenger aboard the car was initially to be a 185-pound dummy named Oscar 8-Ball and then later chimpanzees. Stapp, however, had other ideas. He wanted to see what an actual human could handle, stating Oscar 8-Ball at the project's onset, "You can throw this away, I'm going to be the test subject." David Hill, who was in charge of collecting the test data throughout the experiments and making sure all the telemetry gear stayed working, said, "We had a lot of experts come out and look at our situation, and there was a person from MIT who said, if anyone gets 18 Gs, they will break every bone in their body." That was kind of scary. Dr. Stapp, however, used his extensive knowledge of human physiology, as well as analysing various crashes where people must have survived more than 18 Gs of force, and determined the 18 G limit was absurdly low if a proper restraint system was designed and used. That said, Dr. Stapp, he wasn't stupid, but rather was an excellent and meticulous researcher who would soon earn the nickname the Careful Daredevil. Thus, step one was to first design a proper restraint system and work out the kinks in the testing apparatus. Towards this end, they conducted nearly 36 trial runs using the dummy, which turned out to be for the best. For example, in test run number 1, both the main and secondary braking systems didn't work, owing to the triggering teeth breaking off, and instead of stopping, G-Wiz and Oscar 8-Ball shot off the tracks and off into the desert. Funny enough, after the teeth were beefed up, the braking cams engaged, but they themselves immediately broke. In yet another catastrophic failure, the forces were so extreme that Oscar actually broke free from his restraints. The result was his rubber face literally being ripped off thanks to the windscreen in front of his head. As with the rest of his body, he went flying through the air well over 700 feet, about 200 meters from where the G-Wiz stopped. So this brings us about 2 years into the project on December the 10th, 1947, when Dr. Stapp decided it was his turn to be the dummy. Initially strapping himself in facing backwards, a much safer way to experience extreme G-forces, the first run with a human aboard was a rather quaint 10 Gs during the braking period. After this, they continued to improve the restraint system as Dr. Stapp slowly ramped up the Gs all the way to 35 within 6 months of that first run. He stated of this, "The men at the mahogany desks thought that the human body would never take 18 Gs. Here we were, taking twice that with no sweat." And by no sweat, of course, he meant that through the tests, he'd suffered a hemorrhaged retina, fractured rib, lost several fillings from his teeth, got a series of concussions, cracked his collarbone, developed an abdominal hernia, developed countless body blisters caused by sand hitting his skin at extreme velocities, severe bruising, shattered his wrists, and fractured his coccyx. So, as you can see, definitely no sweat. While recovering, if further tests were needed in the interim, he did begin allowing other volunteers to do the job, but as soon as he was healthy again, Dr. Stapp was back in the seat instead. One of his co-workers on the project, George Nichols, stated that Stapp couldn't bear the idea of someone being seriously injured or killed in experiments that he was conducting, so whenever possible, he made himself the guinea pig. Of course, in order for the research to be as useful as possible and for other scientists to believe what Dr. Stapp was managing to endure, extremely accurate sensors were needed, which is where one Captain Edward A. Murphy comes in. For a little background on Murphy, beyond very briefly helping out on this project, the highlight of his career included working on the SR-71, the XB-70 Valkyrie, X-15 rocket plane, and helping to design the life support system for the Apollo missions. So, yes, quite the CV. Going back to Dr. Stapp's project, at the time, Murphy was working on a separate project at Wright Field involving the centrifuge, including designing some new sensor systems in the process. When Dr. Stapp heard about this, he asked Murphy if he wouldn't mind adapting the sensors for use in Project MX-981, to which Murphy happily complied. More specifically, Murphy's sensor system would allow them to directly measure the G-forces on the passenger rather than relying on measuring the G-forces on the sled body itself. So before we go any further, we should point out that the exact details of what occurred over the 2 days Murphy was directly involved in the project have been lost to history, despite many first-hand accounts from several people. You might think it would make it easy to sort out given this, but human memory being what it is, the accounts from those who were there, they do vary considerably. Illustrating this point in the most poignant way possible, we have a quote from Chuck Yeager, who was good friends with Dr. Stapp. In the quote, Yeager was responding to the widely reported idea that Yeager had sought out Dr. Stapp to clear him for his famous flight where he broke the sound barrier. As to why he chose Dr. Stapp, Yeager supposedly felt that no other doctor but Stapp would clear him on account of Yeager's supposedly broken ribs. Yeager's response to this almost universally reported story is as follows: "That's a bunch of crap. That's the way rumors get started by these people who weren't even there." He goes on, "That's the same kind of crap you get out of guys who were not involved and came in many years later. It's just like Tom Brokaw's book, if you'll pardon the analogy here, about the best of breed or something like that. The same damn thing. I tell it the way I remember it, and that's not the way it happened. I go back and I read a report that I did 55 years ago, and I say, I better tell that story a little bit. Historic events, even from those who were there." He notes, my expression, sexual intellectuals. You know what the phrase is for that? Sexual intellectuals. They're know-it-alls. That's what. And look, we're not going to lie here, we've mostly just included that little anecdote because we're pretty sure sexual intellectuals, know-it-alls, is the greatest description of the staff and subscribers of Blair Found Out that we've ever come across. So we kind of wish we'd named the channel that, so that pretty sure we're going to make a t-shirt of it at least at some point. In any event, that caveat about the inherent inaccuracy of reporting history out of the way, this finally brings us around to the story of how Murphy and his law became a thing. The general story that everybody seems to agree on is that Murphy or another worker there installed Murphy's sensors and then a chimpanzee was strapped into the sled to test them out. Note here that years later in an interview with People magazine, Murphy would claim it was Dr. Stout that was strapped in. After the test run, however, they found that the sensors hadn't worked at all, meaning
Alright,
the whole
see you guys
expensive
later.
and dangerous
Record another
test
one in a
had
little
been nothing. As to exactly